Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Cop Talk. I'm Kevin Schroeder. I'm here with my co-host, Captain Ed Mamet. Say hello, Ed.
Hello, WABC listeners. We're having another prominent guest today.
So today's guest is Paul DiGiacomo. Paul DiGiacomo is the president of the DEA, the Detective Endowment Association, not to be confused with the Drug Enforcement Administration. It's the Detective Endowment Association, the world's largest police department union for the detectives. And Paul came on the job in 1983. He started in the Housing Police Department. And then after that, he rolled over to the New York City Police Department. Right. And he worked in Brooklyn South. And he earned his Gold Shield in 1993. And in 1994, he became a DEA delegate. So, Paul, welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So, Paul, let's get right to it. Most of our listeners know who you are. If they don't, I'm not sure where they've been. But with that said, tell everyone about yourself, your law enforcement background, where you were born and raised, about yourself.
Well, most importantly, my father was a police officer, and I wanted to follow in his footsteps, and I was very proud of him and very excited to get into the field of policing. I came on in 1983 in the New York City Housing Police. I worked in PSA 1 in Coney Island with some great cops, great detectives. You learn the job very quickly. You worked alone a lot. And then I rolled over in 1985, went to the 7-0 precinct. Then I went to Borough Anti-Crime, then Brooklyn South Narcotics, then Major Case in Narcotics. Then I went over to the ATF, Joint Task Force, and then to an FBI Task Force, then HIDA, and then I went full-time into the DEA.
So how much time did you work in Brooklyn before you went to the DEA?
Oh, I worked in Brooklyn for quite a few years, probably about 10 years.
Was it Brooklyn South you
Brooklyn,
most worked
Brooklyn
in?
South, Borough Crime, yeah. It was a great command. It was a very difficult time in our city. We had a lot of cops that were shot and killed in what we call the Bermuda Triangle, the 6, 7, 7, 0, and 7, 1 precincts. You know, Bobby Machado, Louis Miller, Joe Galapo, just to name a few, that lost their lives in the line of duty back in those days.
Paul, what was your most memorable case you worked on?
Well, there was one particular case that I worked on. It was a group of us. It wasn't just me, where we worked on a 20-year-old homicide of a police officer, George Shue. George Shue was coming out of his house. He was a Navy reservist. As he was coming out of his house, he observed an individual breaking into a car. He intervened. The individual, later identified as Henry Vega, turned on the police officer and shot him with a .38 caliber pen gun right in his head, killing him. 20 years later, we wound up working the case. The shooter was infatuated with organized crime. We set up a social club, and we set up like a fake organized crime family. I was one of the undercovers with 2 undercovers and a main undercover. And we wound up, doing the case, getting him involved in drug sales, and ultimately he spoke of the homicide of the cop in the social club that we had wired up with film and sound. And it was a very rewarding case to have worked. I was very proud of that case and very proud to work with the detectives that worked on that case with me.
Captain?
Yeah, Paul, this is really startling. Over 5,000 cops were attacked last year and injured. How would the NYPD respond to that if it happened? Or how are they responding to that? And another question I had for you is, at the time, after the George Floyd riots, you were having lawsuits brought against people that attack cops. Is that still going on?
Absolutely. Anyone that assaults a New York City police detective and there is injury, we will bring them civil action against those individuals.
How many of those cases do you have?
Right now, I think we've had, if I remember correctly, about 6 or 7 that our attorneys are working on.
And in your opinion, what should the PD do to minimize these attacks, which are really troublesome?
Well, we're in a very difficult time in policing in our city because there have been laws enacted, the bail reform laws that we told the governor weren't going to work 4 years ago, the diaphragm compression law, this new law that Jumaane Williams came came out with, they're making laws to constantly tie the hands of the police, which makes our job very difficult. You know, back in the 80s and 90s, we had a difficult time with some politicians. We had a lot going on, but there weren't laws enacted on the books. There were policies, and policies could be changed very quickly. Now, with these laws that are enacted on the books, it's very difficult to efficiently do our jobs. And because of these laws, there's no consequences. And the only way to change things around and to move back in the right direction is to take these laws off the books. And I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Well, that would require legislation.
That's correct.
And what's interesting is Adams now claims that he had no choice in some of these things. He listened to his lawyers. But I have always maintained that the mayor's office, through the Corporation Council, can submit legislation to the city council. Now, with this city council, they'll probably not pass it,
Correct.
but at least the message is given, that we're not going to stand by doing nothing. We're going to bring this litigation to change these laws, and hopefully something might happen.
Well, I find the city council is counterproductive to the safety of the people of this city. They never do anything to enhance the police department, to help the police department. They never enact legislation to help the victims of crime. They just constantly are putting in legislation to tie the hands of the police. And I think it's a disservice to the people of the city, and I think it's wrong. And I think the city is heading in a direction that they're going to be unable to turn back.
That's a very profound statement. You have been the spokesman for quite a few of the unions. You've been speaking up prominently, and I think that's quite impressive. But, Ray Kelly, the former police commissioner, we interviewed him not too long ago. He keeps saying they should bring back the nightsticks, and Curtis Lee will keep saying that, and I believe in that too. I'm from the generation where we carried a nightstick, right, a.k.a. a baton. And I guess you carried a baton also.
I still have my father's.
Okay.
And so did I.
So did I. So are you in favor, I'm assuming this is a loaded question, of bringing back the batons?
Well, I believe if used properly and trained properly, I think they're effective. And I think they make the perpetrators think twice before they assault you. And that's the problem. It's just that, there's a sense of fear on the police part, and there's a sense of being emboldened on the criminal part now. And they're not afraid of the police. They're not afraid to assault the police. And it's a big problem because, another big problem that's part of this whole equation is CCRB, the Civilian Complaint Review Board. They keep trying to grasp more power, and they are. And they're over-budgeted and an incompetent agency, and they're cop haters, and all they do is try to hurt the cops. We're in the process right now. We brought a lawsuit against an individual investigator at CCRB and suing CCRB as a whole as well because, again, their derogatory sense towards the police has to be addressed, and they have to be pushed back.
That's a great idea. Bravo.
Thank you.
Paul, as the DEA head, what is your responsibilities and goal?
Well, the responsibility is, one, to represent our detectives in any type of disciplinary conflict, which we do. We also administer health benefits, prescription drugs, eyeglasses, and dental to both active and retired New York City detectives. And we also sue different perpetrators that assault our detectives. And again, to reiterate, we're suing the CCRB as well for their, inept attacks on our members.
And tell me about your charity work. I know the DEA is very involved with charity work. I know you're very involved with the widows and children. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, because of 9/11, I think we have the highest amount of detectives in all the ranks that we lost in 9/11 because it was the largest crime scene in the history of the NYPD. We had detectives naturally down at Ground Zero. We had detectives at the landfill and detectives at the morgue. And we've lost hundreds of detectives to post 9/11 cancer, and as we sit here right now, there are hundreds that are sick with cancer. So we represent those detectives, and when they pass, it's as they've been shot in the line of duty. They get the same benefits that you deserve, rightfully deserve, as being shot in the line of duty. And COVID as well. We lost 8 detectives, more than any other rank in the New York City Police Department during COVID, because our detectives were out in the hospitals interviewing complainants. They were in close quarters in the box in the room where we do interviews of perpetrators, and they were out in the streets on a regular basis, and they paid the ultimate price, both in 9/11 and and also with COVID, where they gave their lives. And we treat those families just as if it was a detective shot in the line of duty. And those people are very special people to me. I was brought up to go above and beyond for those families, and that's something I live by, and they're very, very special to myself and very special to the DEA as a whole.
Paul, what would you say are the challenges today with for the NYPD detectives? I know there's many of them, but just to name a few, what would you say are some challenges?
The main challenge I believe we have right now is manpower. In 2001, when 9/11 happened, we had 7,500 detectives. Right now, we have about 5,300 detectives, and we're doing more investigative steps now than we did then. We're doing counterterrorism duties now, which we didn't do then. And the caseload in some of the detective squads, in the busy squads, are carrying anywhere from 300 to 500 cases per detective. So that's totally unmanageable. It's not fair to the detectives, and we need more detectives to efficiently do our job.
So the detectives, they come from patrol, correct? There's a white shield, and
Right.
then go through the process, and they're in a squad for...
Yeah, the white shields, they go into anti-crime, and then they do that for a while, and then the CO puts them up in a detective squad. But there's no cops on patrol either, so there's nowhere...
There's no anti-crime either.
Yeah. Well, it's unfortunate because policing is a dying profession. And it used to be something where people wanted the job. Used to have 50,000 people apply for the job, and they don't have that anymore because of all the politics involved. You don't have the backing of the politicians, both on a local, a state, and federal level, which we've never seen before. We always had maybe one entity of government that didn't back you, but now it's all 3 entities of government that don't back the police. And it's not a rewarding job for these new kids. Nobody gets paid enough to get verbally and physically abused the way New York City police officers do. And it's out of control, and it's got to be addressed. And we got to focus on the cops. We got to focus on the victims of crime and stop pandering to the people that commit the crimes.
Yeah, it's how many active detectives, you said?
About 5,300 right now.
And how many retired detectives, members of the DEA?
Well, in total, we have about 18,000.
18,000. Okay. Captain?
It's interesting. When I was a detective, there were approximately 3,000. So the number has more than almost doubled.
Yeah.
But I guess the workload has doubled and the size of the department has doubled.
Well, now we have detectives in narcotics. It's not just the squads. Years ago, right now we have them in narcotics. We have them in counterterrorism. We have them in community affairs. We have them in the Joint Terrorist Task Force. We have detectives all over the world doing counterterrorism duties, keeping this city safe. So it's a little different, but we don't have enough detectives, and that's the problem. There are days in busy detective squads where we have more bad guys in the detective squad cage or cell than we do detectives working in that squad. Yeah.
I believe it. Yeah. Our squads are overwhelmed.
You're speaking about narcotics. There was a time I was 7 years in narcotics. It was called the Narcotics Bureau.
Yeah.
At that time, the detective was not a bureau; it was the detective division,
Right.
and the units under that were the bureaus. So, narcotics was the largest bureau within the detective division. We had approximately 400 people.
Yeah.
And that was back in the late 60s, early 60s, late 60s, when the drug problem was pretty high. It was heroin. So,
and we have to remember also we're very honored and privileged to have ESU, the Emergency Service Unit, are all detectives, or mostly detectives now as well. So out of that 5,300, you have a lot of different groups in there. It's not all detectives doing detective work in detective squads. Everybody does their specialty in counterterrorism, in emergency service, community affairs, accident investigation. So it's a very different detective squad than it was back when
Right.
you were on the
Well,
street.
when I was in, you had the precinct detective squads and some of the specialty units.
Yes.
It wasn't the way it is today. On another tack, you are very involved in the union. What about the dealing with other unions across the country, police unions? Are you involved with them?
Yeah, occasionally we're involved. We're a part of the National Association of Police Organizations and the State Association of PBAs, which is now the police conference that just concentrates New York State. Yes, we're involved in both those entities, and we try and help any way we can, and they help us as well.
Okay. Now, regarding technology, I don't think you're going to like this, but I think it's easier to be a detective today in terms of crime solving than it was when I was around, because you have so much technology to help you, especially with the cameras in the street. Mm-hmm. I can recall that we didn't have that. We had to do a lot of gumshoe work, walking in the middle of the night looking for witnesses. Today, with the cameras in the street, it's much easier to identify who's involved, and that was a big part of an investigation, of learning the identity of the criminal. The rest was apprehending. So I think my opinion is it's easier to be a detective today than it was back in my time. Would you, from a standpoint of crime solution?
Well, I agree with you on that, but, video canvases are very time-consuming.
Yes.
It takes a lot of time to track each camera, to follow the individual involved in the crime. And again, this is all time-consuming stuff where you have to prioritize your cases. Shooting, homicide, sexual assault, God forbid, a cop is shot. A lot of time goes into the video canvases tracking the individual responsible for that crime. And there's just not enough detectives to do it. So, again, we have to prioritize each case on a case-by-case basis.
But also, the paperwork is now, most of it is on computer, correct?
That's correct. Everything's on a computer
Right,
or
so-
a phone.
But
Yeah.
So you don't have to mess around with the paper,
Right.
like I did in my
That's-
time.
That's right. That's correct.
So in a way, it's easier to be a detective today.
I disagree with that.
Well,
I
sure you
disagree
would.
with that. Absolutely, I disagree with that. I think it's even more difficult today because even though you got video there, you still have to identify the perpetrator. You still have to, as Paul said, you still have to do a canvas for the video, identify what video is useful, what's of value, what video is of value. Okay, you may go out there for 2 days and get videos that there's no value. Okay, you really have to, so, and as you're out there doing a canvas for the video, cases are coming in. So I disagree, Captain. I think it's just as difficult, if not more difficult today to be a detective.
And then we
in the
still have to
squad.
do the traditional canvases as well. With the video canvases, we still have to knock on the doors and
Old school
speak to
police work.
Old-
Knock on a door, ask a question, solve a crime.
It's old school police work is sometimes which brings closure to these cases. But before we go any further, I feel it's important that I have to mention something. Today is the 5th anniversary of the loss of Detective Brian Simonson. We had a mass in his honor today, and that was a tragedy. And he was a wonderful detective, well-respected detective, and just a great guy, and somebody that I think should be mentioned and honored on this program here today.
Well, why don't you tell us about what happened with him?
Well, it was a robbery of a cell phone store, and Detective Brian Simonson responded, and he got caught in crossfire in that situation, and he lost his life. And right now I'm in the process of talking to a couple of our friends in Albany and in Congress as well to try and get a bill named after Detective Brian Simonson that would render these cell phones worthless once they are stolen. So what would happen is that the cell phone company would be mandated to shut that phone down and make it inoperable. rendering that phone worthless on the street. Right now, they go for $400 to $700 on the black market. This would put a stop to that, which would bring burglaries, robberies, larcenies, all down in regards to cell phones. I'm praying to God that we get this done. It's starting to get some movement, and that legislation will be named in the memory of our hero detective, Brian Simonson.
That's a good idea.
Paul, I believe your sister passed away from cancer,
Yes.
and she was also a 9/11 responder.
Yeah, my sister was worked for the humane law enforcement. She was a investigator with the humane law enforcement, and she was taking, she was there at the rescue and recovery, but she was also taking the animals out of the buildings in 9/11 and all downtown Manhattan here, and we lost her. We lost her to breast cancer, and she was a wonderful girl, great person. Very proud of her son. He just became a fireman, and he's also a doctor of physical therapy as well. So his mother is very, very proud of him, looking down.
Nice.
What a good kid he turned out to be.
So, what would you give someone today, a kid today who wants to come on the job? What advice would you give anyone who wants to get involved in law enforcement today?
Well, I would have to be quite honest with that individual and explain the difficulties in law enforcement today, and the oversight of law enforcement today. The NYPD has more oversight than a neurosurgeon. For God's sake, it's ridiculous. You have the 5 district attorneys, you have the attorney general, you have the FBI, you have the DOI,
CCRB,
that's right. Yeah, CCRB,
DFI.
IAB. You have so many people looking at everything you do. As I said earlier, a neurosurgeon doesn't have the oversight that cops have. And I would just be honest with the people looking to come on the job and let them know what they're getting into. May not. It's not like television. It doesn't, work out that way. It's a lot of stress, a lot of pressure, and unfortunately, because of what's going on, suicides are up in policing, not only here in New York City but across the whole country, because the pressures that these poor young cops go through today are very, very difficult. We didn't have to go through those pressures as young cops. They're not as bad. They weren't as bad then as they are now, and they got a tough job.
Yeah, true.
You mentioned suicide. We've had several people on this show that are involved in suicide prevention.
Right.
Is the DEA doing anything special for your members in regard to the suicides?
Absolutely. We have a pool of psychiatrists and psychologists that help our members that are not affiliated with the NYPD, because there's always that sense of embarrassment if the person reaches out for help and the job finds out about it. There's that label that goes on you. So we've helped quite a few of our members outside the department get help, and it worked very well so far.
They used to call that the rubber gun squad. Do they still call it that when the cops' guns are taken?
Yeah, well, that's not fair because, I don't like, talking about individuals that have a lot of issues that they go through. They could have been involved in a shooting. They could have saw their partner die. That takes a toll on anyone in any profession, in the military, the police department, the fire department. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes in our world. And there's nothing wrong with talking to somebody to get help to get you through it.
Yeah. So, Paul, I believe you'll be stepping down from the president as DEA come this summer.
Yeah, I have 40 years in the police department, and I've been involved in police unionism since 1989. Wow. But I'll be aging out shortly after the new term starts. So I just don't think that would be in the best interest of the DEA and the members if I were to run. There's a new ticket put together for Team DEA 2024. That team consists of a majority of the team that I'm working with now and worked with for years prior to this. And I think they're well versed on what needs to be done in the DEA, and we'll build upon what we built moving forward.
Okay. And what's next for you?
Well, next is a couple of weeks off, and then we'll figure it out. I have a couple couple of job offers that I have to figure out. But listen, it's a very emotional time for me. It's something I'm going to miss. You know,
Sure.
this was 40 years of my life in policing, and there's times I'm happy and I say it's time to go, but I feel good about it, and there's times I'm very sad about it. Right. So, but it's difficult, but everybody's time comes, and you know, in June I'll be stepping down. I will not seek re-election into the next term, and the people that are running in the next term will carry on, you know, what we've done in the DEA and move it forward.
Captain?
Paul, I empathize with you because I did 40 years, and I know the feeling. It's going to take you a couple of years to recover. Believe me, you'll have dreams about the job, and it's a tough adjustment after 40 years.
Yeah.
But for those listeners, Paul mentioned aging out. What he meant was the retirement age. The mandatory retirement age for the New York City Police Department is 63. Unfortunately, it's been tried. People have tried to extend it, but they're stuck at 63.
Yeah. And the fire department's 65. I
Yeah.
never understood that. But
And the Jersey State Police is 55.
oh yeah. But again, like I said, it's I'm very happy with my career, and I was very proud and honored to be a cop, a detective. I never thought I would be the president of the DEA, and it's something that I wish my father was here to see. He would have been very proud of it. And I'll always be here to help a detective, line of duty family members. That's something that I will always, you know, put as a priority in my life, whether on the job or off.
You're also the president of the Columbia Association, correct?
I was.
Right.
No, I was the president of the Columbia Association quite a few years back. My father was as well.
Wow.
And that's something that was a very honorable position as well. It's something that I enjoyed. But anyway, I have St. Patrick's Day coming up soon, and I look forward to being at the parade with the canteen and at the pier after. That's something that's very, very fun, and a tradition that's been going on for years and years and years.
Yeah, true. Any last words, Captain?
No, I just think that Paul is a very interesting guy, and I think he's got a career ahead of him.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I got to say this was truly an honor to be here today, and I want to thank you both for having me. And
Thank you.
You know, you'll always have my door's always open to both of you gentlemen.
Thank you.
I really
Thank you.
appreciate it. All you have done, Kevin. Speaking of which, for our line of duty families with Stephen Van Zandt, you've raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for the DEA Widow and Children, and that's something that needs recognition. And I thank you for that very much. And Captain, I love speaking to you. Your old stories, and they're great stories, and something.
You should read my thesis that I wrote in 1975.
I will.
It's in your office.
It is in my office. Okay, I'll
Yes,
find it. I will read it.
It's the organization and history of the Detective Bureau going back to its very beginnings.
Wow.
Somebody in your office has it.
I'm sure Sam Katz has it.
she
Now.
probably
I'm
has,
sure
yes.
Sam
I will
Katz, yeah.
get my hands on that, and in retirement, I'll read that every day. So.
Okay.
Well, Paul, it was an honor for me to be an elected delegate for 10 years with the Midtown North Detectives under the DEA. It was a great run, and it's a great union, protecting the NYPD detectives, active and retired, and fighting for all the right cause. So thank you again for being here. We wish you luck in your retirement, but you still have, I think, a lot of work to do before you
we got
leave.
a couple of months to go. So.
Yeah, you have a lot of work to do before you leave.
I'm here till
believe
June,
me,
so thank you. I appreciate it.
It's going to be a lot of work, but thank you again. So everyone, Paul DiGiacomo, president of the DEA, NYPD Detective Union, one of the largest detective unions in the world. If you like what you hear, please follow us on Twitter, Cop Talk at WABC. That's Cop Talk at WABC. And you could also subscribe to Cop Talk. Until next time, God bless the NYPD. God bless America. Thank you.